All right, we're going to start off the afternoon session with a little bit of IoT. And our own Brian Gilmore is going to be presenting a number of interesting architectures and philosophies and technologies. So Brian, are you ready?
I'm ready, Chris. Thanks so much.
Then do it.
All right. Hey, everybody. It's very nice to meet most of you. My name is Brian Gilmore. I recently joined InfluxData. I've had sort of an interesting, circuitous career. I've worked in, hospitals as an administrator. I worked in public aquariums as a life support technician. I was a smart buildings programmer, and somehow I ended up in software with a reasonable background of being able to take industrial equipment and other systems that don't typically integrate well with business analytics or other analytic software, which has brought me to InfluxData. I'm super excited. Having come from that world, I think. There is a big gap, still a major divide, I would say, between, the sort of business teams and what they're able to do with software versus, some of those more operational teams, the teams that do half their job with a wrench like I used to, and getting those people access so that they can improve their operations is something I'm super passionate about. And I want everybody to have the best of the best in terms of user interfaces and analytics backends and all of that. So again, another reason I'm here. I'm also definitely not a traditional tech worker. I didn't sort of go to college. I haven't had a lot of experience, but I spent 8 years at another big software company doing a very similar job. And during that period, we had a lot of interest in, making sure that tech itself and the business itself was as inclusive as possible. So I have a lot of passion about that. If it's something you're interested in, or if it's something you want to discuss, I'm always happy. On top of that, if you just feel like it's, you're having a hard time breaking into the business, or you need some contacts or whatever, I love to interact with the community and help people get their best shot, because there were so many people who did that for me in my career and sort of got me to this point where I'm at now. So I think the first thing we need to do is sort of level set on IoT. I've been talking to audiences, to customers about IoT now for 10 full years. And I hear regularly sort of some of the same confusion about, like, what is it? What does it do? Where do I buy it? And all of that, I think we should be able to get through here pretty quickly. So think about the Internet of Things as just another phase in sort of the evolution of the internet. I think, like, if you, for those of you who have gray in their beards like I do, the Internet of Documents, when we were just sort of like poking around with Netscape Navigator, or tools that were even sort of older than that, like I remember the University of Minnesota Gopher system was sort of my first AIM style chat. But really what this was about was taking sort of a lot of the sort of recorded knowledge of human culture and putting it somewhere where it was easily accessible by everybody. And at that point, basically books became the biggest sort of provider of information, and websites after that, that human beings could log in and consume. I think the very next step was to sort of figure out how we could start creating some applications on the internet. And, the obvious ones were first, I think, banking, because banking had already been sort of a networked business to begin with. The stock markets were starting to come, especially with NASDAQ, into a more sort of networked high-tech world. We started to do a lot of banking. And the great thing about this was now, we had a lot of innovation around security and, speed of transactions, and then transaction monitoring, all of that sort of came with it. Now that we could find our money on the internet, of course, the sort of next phase was, well, how do we spend our money on the internet? And I imagine if we had called this the Internet of Shopping Malls, right? I don't know that it ever would have sort of happened in the way it did, but Amazon really started it. There were actually companies like eBay before that, and but what they did was they really started bringing full-fledged e-commerce, and where supply chains now were really full citizens of this internet. And then I think the one that's sort of would have been most comedically named if we had done it the same way we did the Internet of Things is the Internet of People. Like, nobody would have signed up for even MySpace if it was called the Internet of People. But this is really where every individual, I mean, we're talking billions of people now, are on the internet, both producers of, sometimes for better or worse, but producers of and consumers of information. So now, fast forward, 5 more years, and now we have this Internet of Things. I mean, the landscape in the Internet of Things right now is so wide. It covers the gamut of industrial companies all the way up through, connected toothbrushes and refrigerators, and all of the networking and the cell phone chips and all of that goes into making it happen. And we haven't yet really seen a leader in terms of a company, really pop up here. If you look at that, that is actually one of the many Internet of Things landscapes, sort of just below it. And, there's a lot of logos on there. So there's still a lot of great opportunity, a lot of opportunity and room for innovation. I think you know, this is important to the folks listening in today because, if we all sort of come to an agreement that IoT is evolutionary and not revolutionary, we can use what we already know. This is not something brand new. It's not something net new. It still uses TCP, IP, UDP, all these things that we've learned about over the years. A lot of the user interfaces are done with Angular or, whatever sort of flavor of JavaScript and HTML that you're interested in. And those can apply to build the applications or build the services that allow these machines, these devices to come on our networks and become sort of net producers and consumers. I think a lot of people are really concerned about, the security of the internet, like refrigerator botnets and, all of these types of scary things that are actually happening. Probably not sort of at the scale that the media would like you to believe, but generally there is, of course, this is a new surface for attack, and there are people out there who are trying to get in to these newly networked and newly connected systems, just like they do any other newly connected system. But we can still apply like our best practices from a software development perspective, our best practices from a cybersecurity perspective, and then as we're operating these networks, these applications. I mean, the world's, almost every application now is hybrid. It's deployed. It's, there's parts of it that run on mobile, parts of it that run, on cloud services, part of it that runs, on desktops or wherever it might run. And the IoT is just sort of another example of that. And I did say this on the, sort of last slide, but I want to reiterate it here is that there's no Facebook, Amazon, E-Trade, or Google yet in IoT. I think all of them really, except for E-Trade, have made, some sort of, half-hearted attempt to get in there. But I think there's a huge opportunity here for somebody to build that sort of like super compelling, super sticky killer application around IoT, both on the industrial side of things as well as on the consumer side of things. So speaking of that, I think if you are looking to sort of get into the business, or you're looking for an area to start a business, or you're looking for an opportunity to learn some new skills, I think this is after, like I said, 10 years plus of discussing this business. These are really the three main areas that we see a lot of opportunity on the software and services side. The industrial IoT, that's the world I came from. This is sort of like a modernization of industrial control systems, SCADA systems, by connecting them up to cloud or to the internet so that you can now apply these more advanced technologies to those systems, like machine learning or better user interfaces or stream processing, whatever it might be. But ultimately what you're doing is you're optimizing, industrial processes, be it manufacturing, oil and gas production, etc. The use cases here that use time series data tend to revolve around like optimization of both the equipment, the assets, as well as the process. Whether if you're like making widgets, like let's optimize the number of widgets we make, and then let's also optimize to make sure that the machines that are making those widgets break down as little as possible. Another big one, and I think it's really interesting, is that worker safety and workplace safety is still really top of mind for a lot of organizations. And when you think about being able to put the time series of human behavior alongside of that time series of asset operations, it's a really interesting place to be able to work some of your InfluxDB magic in correlation there. The enterprise IoT is it's really fuzzy. It's really blurry right now, I would say. There's not a tremendous amount of companies developing here. I think it's smart buildings are sort of falling in that industrial IoT range. You do hear a lot about smart campuses, smart cities type projects. These are run by governments, but these governments, because they have or these campuses, because they have large IT firms, are building these just like distributed applications. So they're much more likely to use say Kubernetes than some other IoT platform that handles all that orchestration stuff. And it's really about, of course, making the world around us work better, but then also making sure that the experiences of the employees in the buildings or the citizens just, as citizens, have the best experience, whether it's through, their consumption of public services like transportation or, water treatment, whatever it might be. Then the third one, and this is, I think, the IoT that everybody hears so much about, it's the consumer side, right? So like these are digital products. There is some home automation here. I think there would be some debate whether or not enterprise IoT and would include home automation because it includes smart buildings. But what's really interesting here is that this is the one where, yeah, it is about monitoring the device and like giving somebody a mobile app so that they can see if they left their oven on is very valuable. But ultimately, for the actual vendors, the people who are producing those ovens, it's much more about understanding how their consumers are using those products. And I ran into somebody at a IoT conference. It's got to be close to 10 years ago now. And she was telling me about like the warranty card conundrum, and that like when you used to buy an electronic before, they'd give you a warranty card, and you'd maybe so that you could get some kind of warranty on it, you'd fill out your name and your phone number, whatever, you'd send it in, and then they would have to have a telemarketer call you and ask you questions. But her point was that you were constantly asking the customer about the product, so you could build better products, you could come out with new colors, you could make new features or whatever. And now, because the product is completely connected and it is instrumenting almost everything that the owner is doing with it in terms of those UI interactions, the actual use of the product itself, now it's completely flipped on its head, and you're basically asking the product about the customer. And that is really that huge value there through that through that connectivity. And that's why these companies, whether they be coffee makers or vacuum cleaners or whatever, are connecting it. It's not just to give the additional value added services to the customer, but it's also for them to get a better understanding of those customers, which I think that's really powerful, and it requires time series, of course. So somebody said or asked something about architecture, and I've been trying to sort of consolidate this now pretty much for the last 3 or 4 years. I think there's sort of this blurry idea of the edge, right? Where, I like to think of the edge as any place that the technology, like the digital stuff, is interfacing with the world on either the sensor side or the actuator side, especially like if you think about industrial controls, like, water temperature too high, turn on the chiller. That's sort of a sensor and an actuator type interaction. And there are many applications, automation, things like that run out there. And they've been doing that for a very long time. I mean, the first sort of digital automation systems went in the late 60s and early 70s. And ultimately, they have a network connection now to some type of gateway. Now, that gateway may have sensors on it. It doesn't always have sensors on it, but it runs applications. And those applications, because they are sort of one level divorced from the edge, they're working much more around coordination, orchestration of all of those downstream edge devices. Whereas, like I said before, those edge devices are actually moving the valves and doing that kind of automation. And then they're also network connected to the cloud now, where you have applications again running there, but it's more about integration at that cloud layer, right? So now, how do you take all of this digital information that's both been processed at the edge and coordinated through that gateway and integrate it with the best that cloud has to bring, whether it's scalability, it's SaaS systems that are only available on the cloud, really advanced machine learning that requires like highly parallelized processing that you would only want to run on sort of IaaS GPUs. And then, of course, that's also typically if I'm on my phone or I'm on my web page to check out the condition of my asset or the safety of my workers, that's the interface that I'm going to interact through. Now, the solution builders are focusing on building solutions that take into account all sort of those phases. And if you look at the left side, like monitoring is very much about the edge. There is, of course, gateway monitoring and cloud monitoring, but it really much more is about like, let's monitor those temperatures and make sure that we're seeing, the regular changes in those. Managing, it's a little bit more hybrid on the edge and gateway side, as is securing. But those typical services, microservices, applications, whatever you want to think of them, are actually going to do most of the interaction there between the edge and gateway layers. And you start to get into the deploying, the orchestration side, where you're actually like rolling out new firmware or doing that. Nine times out of 10, that stuff's going to happen through the gateway. The gateway is going to coordinate that, software deployment. And then as you get up higher and you get into those, what I like to call high value use cases, because people will tend to spend more money on them, and they certainly get more attention at the boardroom table. But that sort of analyzing the operations, optimizing those operations, and then commercializing those operations. I mean, people don't make multi-million-dollar investments in digitizing their factories unless they think that there's either going to be some ROI in terms of efficiency or some ROI in terms of new product, new services that they can sell downstream to people and customers and companies in their supply chain. So quick 4 bullets on this. So for those of you who want to build IoT solutions, the good news is you're at InfluxData's conference, and every solution in the IoT needs a time series database. Whether you're tracking the sort of performance and behavior of assets, or the performance and behavior of factory workers, or performance and behavior of the consumers who are using your connected coffee machine, all of that behavior is going to have a timestamp, and therefore it is excellent, to store and process in your favorite time series database, which of course we all hope is InfluxDB. It is still choose your own adventure. There really are very few sort of like approved or best practices stacks. Which is kind of interesting, because if you go back to like 2015, 16, 17, all of these companies were coming together to create these consortiums about the OpenX or whatever. None of that really happened. It's going to be like developer preference. They're going to want to use the tools to develop. They're going to want to use the tools that they use to deploy in the sort of DevOps model, that they know and that they love. And that's, I think that's a good thing. And I think that's the reason that, I really was interested in coming over to that more developer focused and open sourced side of the IoT, because I think like eventually these applications will become very similar to other distributed applications that are being developed for any other number of use cases. If you do want to purchase a platform, there is a huge range of complexity. Like some of them are literally requiring that you build your own. Others are much more composable. I think the last time I sort of really did a survey, there were like 600 plus IoT platforms out there. None of them were really taking the lead in terms of customer adoption. So that still leads me to believe that this is potentially a build your own world still, and maybe forever. And as I said before, there's no single vendor. Like there is no AWS, there is no Azure in terms of their sort of ownership of cloud than in the IoT. It's just like they both try to be that in IoT, but it's not. I mean, the vast majority of the applications that run in those sort of large cloud providers are all they're typical IT or other applications. So you're going to have to make a choice. I think if you're going to choose, of course, you do want to make the right choice. I would highly recommend doing some pilots. I think that's a good way to choose. But you also could try to work with a company like InfluxData, who's working really hard on building an ecosystem around this IoT opportunity, because we're working really hard to find a group of companies that are like-minded, sort of have a passion for open source, but also want to create commercial supportable software, and whose platforms and products are really complementary. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about us. I think, yes, one of my favorite shows, Stranger Things, but of course, one of the things I appreciate about this show is that they sort of all really complemented each other in a way that was unexpected. And when I look at the ecosystem that we're trying to build right now, I mean, we're technically complementary. I think complementary is always a plus. I usually put both of those on there because I never know which one is right. It's a shared mission of making IoT approachable and accessible for both developers as well as the people who use the applications that those folks develop. Shared values of open transparency, of course, and open source. I'm also up for pushing limits and breaking things. I think we're in a world where we're not going to be doing crazy things on oil rigs, but there are opportunities to really say what if, and try it out. I mean, I think if you look at anything that Elon Musk drives through his companies, whether it be SpaceX or Tesla or whatever, he's not afraid to break things, including the windows of the Cybertruck. I just canceled my Cybertruck reservation as well. And if you are a vendor and you're in this world, or you're a developer and you're in this world, or you're a services provider or whatever, and you're familiar with InfluxDB, or you're an expert at InfluxDB and you want to sort of work with us in this application space, let me know. Please join us. I mean, like I said, I'm just 4.5 months in, and I'm learning a lot. I'm talking to a lot of people, and inside and outside, and it's a really we're really interested in talking to like-minded folks. So just let me know. We've sort of run into a great crew already. If you're not familiar with Balena, they make a really great sort of deployment and management solution for an operating system that can run on Raspberry Pi or a bunch of other sort of embedded controllers. It makes deploying things like InfluxDB and managing it through fleet level variables very, very easy. And so I've been playing around with a lot of it. As you'll see, we're going to talk about this guy behind me. HiveMQ, great MQTT application, of course. HiByte, if you're on the industrial side, HiByte is made up by a lot of folks from Kepware, which is a PTC company. PTC also provides ThingWorks. But HiByte is sort of I don't want to call it a spinoff because it's a brand new company, but it's a lot of the sort of key people from Kepware, and they're working very closely with us to make sure, because they're much more about the semantic modeling of the industrial data, and it's a really good complement for us. Another company I'm excited about is Occam. We've been working with them quite a bit over the last couple of years, and we've really tried to pick up the pace with them. They're about making easy to deploy secure tunneling applications, so that as part of a Balena solution, you could drop an InfluxDB on a Raspberry Pi and an Occam block on the Raspberry Pi, and then not have to worry about multi-hops or switching back and forth between cellular and Wi-Fi or whatever. It just is basically going to make sure that you have a secure tunneled route from that Raspberry Pi to your cloud services or whatever. We're working with some great systems integrators and services companies too. Like Factory has built an entire industrial historian right around our product. RTI is doing some really great things there in the industrial space as well. And same with Nortal. They're building some really great solutions for their industrial companies that we really appreciate. And we're not going to say that's it. That's all we have room for. We have room for a lot more. So if you are interested, just again, let me know. So we didn't have a ton of time. I had 30 minutes. I want to talk about my one crazy idea. You can see the drone behind me. The irony of this sort of being is that is actually not my drone. That one there is, I just stole the picture from the website because as you may be aware, there's been some pretty serious supply chain disruptions, but it is here now. This is real. You can see it. It's for the price, it's amazing. Alibaba, China, you can find anything. And I live right near the ocean. Like I said, I worked in public aquariums. I met my wife in public aquariums. That's actually her releasing, if you can see in the square, that's her standing there next to that cage, releasing one of the seal pups that she rehabbed at our local aquarium here. And so, she'll get a call and she'll have to go drive somewhere long to take a look and see if there's a seal or a beached whale or dolphin or whatever. And, it takes a long time. It can be dangerous if it's not in an easily accessible area. So my idea is to create a drone that you can just send out that will be able to do some vision analytics to see if it is a whale or whatever, for both surveys as well as rescue. Now, I bought a drone that could heavy lift, because if you look in the lower right hand corner, that was actually my first best idea for saving seals. My wife told me that was crazy, but generally, like, the goal is to push these things out at scale. Launch them from the decks of boats or from people's houses, like my house, which is right by an area that we see a lot of stranders. And yeah, we're gonna build this, and I'm working with a lot of the ecosystem that we just talked about. Now, again, for the FAA, this is probably just a POC. I haven't looked through the regulations and stuff. I know I have to like register this and all that. I know the FAA is not on here, but you do have to actually pay attention to stuff like that. But ultimately, on the drone, we're going to be running, of course, a telemetry and video transmitter, so that we can sort of back up all of those images and all of that data, maybe to some place like S3 where it would be available through IOX, or of course, a lot of the telemetry will go direct into a local InfluxDB instance for persistence on the Raspberry Pi. And then we'll use, some of the cool flux mechanisms like 2 to actually get that out. I'm using a tensor processing unit accelerator, which is going to allow me to do much better whale, not whale stuff or interpretations. And that image relay service, of course, is going to be relaying images, to both a trained and other image storage system, as well as, of course, it'll create the messages that will respond back to whoever asked for the drone to go out and check, to say, yeah, there's a seal out there, and yes, it's alive, and no, it doesn't look happy, and you probably should go out and check it. I think the other big piece of this is like prototyping on one. I know a lot of you are probably working on that right now, but like basically, like, I want to have hundreds of these eventually, because it is a big thing that happens, and it's superhuman resources intensive, and it can be dangerous for the people who have to go out and sort of do this. And if we have technology like these drones, I feel like we should be taking attention or paying attention to that, and using it. So my requirements for this, because this is me, I'm not a developer, I'm an architect, I'm sort of a composer. I can put stuff together, I can hack together some code, but like, it has to be low code and composable. I don't want to have to write 10,000 lines. I need that data to be totally secure, because hackers always want to know where the whales are. I can use Occam for that. I need to be able to do OTA updates, and I want to be able to do OTA updates over the air, without the drone falling out of the sky, because if it's over the ocean, it could hit a whale in the head, and that would be a problem. I do have to like persist data on the edge, of course. And as we know, the OSS Edge version of InfluxDB is just awesome for that. I'm going to write some applications, of course. I'm going to do some training of the models, the whale, not whale, in the cloud, and then I'll pass those models down through Balena to those Raspberry Pis, and then we'll apply those models, and we'll be doing whale, not whale as soon as possible. I do have to use blockchain though, because if I'm going to build a business, I heard you don't get funding without blockchain. So we'll think about that. Service-oriented architecture for this is, I think I've already described all of this. I think the one piece that's going to be most interesting is basically that self-managed cloud gateway. I think, to have that sort of Occam receiver, telegraph to do some parsing of the data into line protocol, and capacitor to do any stream processing we need to, is very, very important. And again, being able to centrally manage all of those 100+ drones in my wildest dreams, but right from the Balena Cloud device management system is going to be great. They have an open source version I can run myself, and then of course centralizing, storing, accessing lots and lots of long-term historical data from both the drones and the pictures in InfluxDB Cloud is going to give me the opportunity, as the sort of operator of this system, to understand the overtime operations, the number of the deployments, all of that kind of stuff. But then, of course, as I think about, okay, I want to build applications, that will allow marine biologists to log in and run their own patterns, do their own machine learning or whatever, it's going to give me all those APIs that I need to accomplish that. So it'd be pretty exciting. If I'm invited back next year after this, wild talk, like I will give you guys an update. I promise. It may be from prison with some FAA handcuffs on, but we will see. So a couple of things that I just need you to check out next. I know we just hit time, but I want to make sure that I let you know about a few key things. First of all, is that we are working on MQTT in Flux. It has been improved, sorry, where we took the MQTT2, modified it a bit to just be MQTT publish, which is better in a way that because it doesn't rely on input tables, you can use map and all that kind of stuff. But it's not perfect. We're still working on this, and I'll tell you that. Like I said, we're just getting really into the swing of doing this seriously. But the thing is that if you use MQTT from, which is going to let you grab data from an MQTT broker, you can process that data in Capacitor and InfluxDB with Flux, and then you can publish that out to another MQTT topic. This does what I think is going to be most key for our success in the IoT, which is that it puts the time series database in the center as both a consumer of IoT information and as a publisher of IoT information. And that's going to let it become a much bigger part of the ecosystem, which is great. We've got a ton of awesome case studies. You guys should feel free, shoot the QR codes, read about these. Loft Orbital is, literally using InfluxDB to keep satellites in space. They're basically going to be the AWS, I believe, of satellites, in that they're basically time sharing satellites as a service. Texas Instruments doing great things around, managing the fabrication facilities on the industrial side of things. And I know Paul covered Verisi Rubin yesterday, which is, this is like deep space exploration and monitoring telescopes and things like that with InfluxDB, which is that's awesome. I mean, it's great stuff. I know Tim just spoke, but this is also going to be recorded, so I would highly recommend you go back and rewatch or watch it for the first time if you haven't seen it. This is really good stuff on sort of like that, as I mentioned earlier, that more like IT style distributed architecture for IoT. And we just listened to her. I was frantically taking notes about all of the Flux tips and tricks because, like I said, I'm still a noob and I'm learning all about this stuff with you guys. And on the on-demand side, watch Tobias's presentation on the boring machines, like tunnel boring machines that are monitored with Flux. Super cool, or monitored with InfluxDB. Super cool stuff. And then also check out, the team from Eldor's presentation about MQTT and machine data collection. So if you want to get in touch with me or the team, Sam has been at Influx for 5 years. You guys probably all know him. Anders has been here a while as well. He's the head of partnerships. So if you do want to become part of this, ragtag ecosystem, we're having a lot of fun and we're doing a lot of really cool things. So we'd welcome it. Again, I'm Brian Gilmore. I have somehow, conned my way into helping sort of coordinate all of this at InfluxDB, but I'm super happy to be here and I'm super happy to be working with all you guys. And with that, I think we go to questions, but we don't really have time for questions, Chris, or how are we doing? Okay, awesome. What items on the roadmap are particularly helpful for IoT solutions? Okay, cool. Well, I think there's two sides of that. I think if we look at the IOX stuff that, I know Jacob talked about it a little bit today. I didn't have a chance to watch that yet. I will watch that. And Paul mentioned everything in IOX is going to be extremely helpful to do IoT scale work. The IoT has not even yet caught up to sort of the current architecture for InfluxDB, but it will, and the largest architectures will really need to work at IOX scale. So that's the one I'm sort of most focused in on. And then I think as we look at things like cloud native connectors and connectors to connect things like MQTT or other sort of cloud native IoT platforms, those are going to be huge because, again, time to awesome. We just want people to be able to go into Influx and say, here's where my IoT information lies. Just, bring it in and do this. Second one, would you recommend using InfluxDB on a Raspberry Pi? Yeah, I mean, I'm trying it. I don't think it would hurt. I think there's some things that you can do with today's Pis that I don't know if I would recommend it doing it on like a 2 or a 3 but the 4s, you can attach like legitimate disks to them. I'm gonna be using like a high speed SSD for the storage, so you don't run into that issue of trying to save all that data on the flash card, which I've had bad luck with that in previous attempts, not with Influx, but before. The memory is good. I got 8 GB of memory on that. I can run it just fine. I think as you start to explore some of the new stuff, I think whether it's going to be available in open source or when, we're not 100% convinced or committed there yet. But I think that that ability to sort of like move data from a small instance of InfluxDB running on a drone, to either an intermediary or to InfluxDB cloud. When the drone has connectivity, either it's landed and can reconnect it to Wi-Fi, or it's got a cell phone signal or whatever. That's going to be the way to do it, because if a lot of the IoT is not going to be connected full time. It's just either the batteries don't allow it or the networks don't allow it. So I think pushing an InfluxDB all as close to the edge as you can is always going to be a great idea, especially now that you can like run Flux there and do all that. So it's good stuff. So I think that's all the questions. You guys know where to find me. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm sorry to the team for taking a little extra time, but as you can tell, I like to talk about this stuff. So just find me. Appreciate it.
Oh, we love the enthusiasm. No problem at all, Brian. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we all look forward to seeing what you build, because I have some ideas about that too. So I'm going to ping you later on.